Welcome to the new IT. The new IT. Here we are again. Brad, tell us about the show today.
Yeah, today's actually a really cool show. We've got Darren Lee from ProofPoint on with us. So I just wanted to let everybody know kind of a little bit about kind of what we're going to talk about. So obviously we already know, but Darren works for ProofPoint. He's does a lot with cybersecurity and whatnot, but I'll let Darren introduce himself and tell us a little bit about ProofPoint.
Yeah, let's just get to know Darren for a minute. Just kind of give us a heads up, the company, you know, just so we can kind of get to know who we're talking to.
Great. Well, thanks, Brad and Bobby, for letting me be on the show, number one, and a chance to be part of the conversation. So first, maybe an introduction to myself, and then I'll tell you a little bit about ProofPoint. My name's Darren Lee, and I am Executive VP GM over one of our business units here at ProofPoint. So I report into our CEO. ProofPoint, if you're not familiar with the company, we do just a little better than 1.3 billion a year, focused around all use cases related to cybersecurity, use cases related to the compliance that our customers have to adhere to. Company has been around for about 18 years now. So we actually took the company public about 10 years ago. And uniquely, we just took the company private about 6 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
So ProofPoint was acquired and taken private. It was a $12.3 billion acquisition. It's the largest take private of a technology company ever.
Wow.
So again, 12.3 billion cash, taking it private with a firm, Thoma Bravo. Many of your listeners may be familiar with them. Fantastic group. Really, really glad to be able to do it. And we think it's going to give us some great operational leverage to do a number of things that we think will be beneficial to the company, beneficial in market, but new news for us, if you will. 6 weeks old now, but a new position for us being private again.
Whoa. Wow. Well, that's an interesting little side note.
Yeah, I mean, I had no idea. I mean, I knew they were public, but I didn't know that they had decided to go private again. So that's awesome.
Interesting, exciting. Well, tell us what is the company? Just so I mean, people that don't know or are not in the know, what is your prime? Well, can we just ask the first question?
Sure.
How is your technology disruptive? How would you feel that you guys are bucking the system or going in a different direction or what have you?
Yeah, I like the question in that. The expectation of any technology company is, in order to survive, to grow, inherent in the model is it has to be a disruptor. And so we stare at two things when we talk about disruption. For us, number one, you've got to be changing a prior mode of behavior or a mode of taking action with something brand new and different. I'll explain that in a moment in our context.
This is good.
But second is equally important to that. And then sometimes we lose sight of this. That in order to be sustainable, the business model too must be disruptive and support the new innovation. So, simple example is that we're all familiar with, of course. When Google steps into market many, many years ago now, it obviously offered great disruptive technologies across a variety of industries, but certainly just even take Yellow Pages, for example, it was a 100% replacement overnight. But the reason it sustained is its business model is completely different by selling Google AdWords. So when you bring those two together, that becomes powerful. So in the world of cybersecurity, what we set out to do inside of ProofPoint is there are bad actors out there trying to take advantage of us as individuals, but increasingly take advantage of companies. You're all familiar with ransomware that's been going on fairly prolific of late. You may have also noticed even recently, as in yesterday, again, we see Russian actors, state-sponsored, increasing their attacks against U.S. assets. So this continues to take place. And historically, the way in which the models built up over time to take care of these bad actors is, well, how do I secure my computer, right? How do I put a password on it, as a simple example? How do I do multi-factor authentication so that I can make sure nobody gains access to my stuff? Super important to do. But what we found is these threat actors, they evolve fairly quickly. And so you've got to have some innovation in how you evolve with them. So today, for you, Bobby, or you, Brad, the threat actor is actually not really targeting your computer necessarily. or if you were a company, the assets of the company, they're actually targeting you as a person. And so that's innovation number one, which is, well, if I'm going to protect someone in a cybersecurity context, how do I protect the people in the company? Because that's the weakest link. Let me give you an example. One of the greatest vectors that we see, ransomware being one, but another really big one is what is known in the market as business email compromise. You guys have read about it. You may not have known the label, but when you hear about people that have lost money through wiring out to what is really a stolen set of banking credentials, what has taken place is their supply chain gets compromised. And so an email comes into you, and it might say, and it might look like it's coming from Bobby to Brad, and it says, hey, Brad, we haven't paid a particular vendor. Could you go ahead and get the money wired out? Oh, by the way, they have a new account. Here's the new information. Please wire it there. Well, Brad looks at that, and it legitimately came from Bobby's email account. Now, it turns out it's not Bobby, right? It's a threat actor that took and had Bobby's credentials, spoofing Brad. Brad sends money, boom, money gone, fully laundered in a global marketplace. Well, how do you stop that? So innovation number one is, well, let's not worry as much about the systems infrastructure. Let's worry about the people. And so how do I protect Brad from being susceptible to this particular tactic? And it's nothing that's bad on Brad, because it was a legitimate email from Bobby. Now, it wasn't for Bobby the person, it was from his account. And so how do you do that? And so at ProofPoint, we employ an enormous amount of machine learning, artificial intelligence, and we build what we call a threat graph. And it has almost 1 trillion nodes in it, where we know worldwide who these actors are, how they behave, how they're profiling you, because they're looking at your social media, by the way.
Oh, wow.
They go look up Brad on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, I don't know, maybe on TikTok as well. But they will build out this profile. So when that email comes in, it's highly targeted. It might even reference your members of your family or your particular last vacation, et cetera, in order to make it that much more real, to get you to click and give up credentials that they then take advantage of to steal money. And so what you have to do technologically is to say, look, this is not just about passwords and multi-factor authentication or updating my system with new changes in Windows, et cetera. You should do those. I'm not, discrediting that at all. However, the threat actor knows that to really get to you, it's like, I'm going to have a targeted attack here. And so how do I profile so that Brad would have a reasonable heads up that this is not a reasonable request coming from Bobby? How do I grab that and protect him? And it turns out there's a lot of things that you can actually do to do that. And ProofPoint does in fact do that. And so the business model of ProofPoint really relies upon a couple of things. One, all of our customers, they pay a subscription fee. And the reason they do it is they're buying into a community where we're seeing these threats and these actions taking place. We've got well over 2/3 of the Fortune 500 as customers. So we're seeing it at scale. We're seeing billions of these happening every single day through our systems. And so when I go and protect a large financial institution, in turn, I'm also able to protect a large consumer goods company, because they too are seeing the same sorts of attacks, and we can triangulate, know that, and protect the customer base because it's so large, prolific. We see a lot of data. We're able to hone it in. So those are some of the innovations that are super important to us. We refer to it as a people-centric mode of security, and it is the way in which these threat actors are in fact targeting you today. There's a lot of really interesting examples of these individuals, both at a human level, who they are, and how they're doing these attacks.
Wow.
That is interesting. I mean, I didn't realize that it was that advanced. I guess I just didn't realize how much people are actually being able to utilize, your social profiles to go against you.
And he kind of hit two questions with one, because we also talk about how you are innovative, and you kind of beat us to the punch on that. Right. That so has it really gotten that far that your AI and stuff really kind of understands when it's not the real person, and does it red flag it? How does it? I'm
How does
just
it
curious.
know?
Yeah, I'm
You
just
took my
curious. How does that work so it's not me? How does the whole system? How does it figure that out?
So there's certain patterns of behavior that we will see where you got to think of these actors. Here's a great example of one. He's well known out there. He actually got arrested about a year ago now. But by the way, you can still go on Instagram and you can see his live account, Hush Puppy. Hush Puppy, Puppi. 1.2 million followers, very prolific, more than happy to show you the great wealth from everything from his Rolls Royce to his Bentley to his pad sitting on, some Greek island, etc. And he will say, makes his money in, quote, real estate development. Well, that's not at all true. He actually made his money through these very sophisticated attacks I was just discussing, where he will create a social profile around these users that he's targeting in order to get their credentials. And then from there, if I will, for example, target you guys as a company and I'm Hush Puppy, I'll figure out a lot about your social profile and I'll get an email into you that looks very legitimate. And I'll ask you to say, oh, guess what? Your LinkedIn account, we just had an update. Could you just please log in quickly, username, password, because Brad, I need to use it such that we can let you publish something on LinkedIn about your latest podcast. And you're like, oh boy, well, I better do this quickly. Boom, 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 type in, bang. I got your account credentials. Now what I do is once I have them, I quietly observe. I watch, who does Brad email with every day?
Wow.
I then say, what does an invoice look like from Brad's company? Who are his suppliers that he's actually paying? And I build up the profile over time. And now comes the killer punch, which is email comes in and it says, quote, from Bobby. And when it does, it says, Brad, I haven't been paid. Could you please make sure that this takes place? Here's the invoice, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it looks just like yours because he's stolen the letterhead for what your invoice looks like. He actually can stare at your calendar and knows who you're meeting with. Wow. And he'll build up a profile so he really targets it extremely well. Well, it turns out what they really are, if you think of them in a model, they're direct marketers. Now, what their marketing is really bad, but they're direct marketers. And so as they build up their campaigns, they don't need to take the time to make every one of these campaigns look different for every single person. It's the same campaign, but played against all these people. And so as ProofPoint, we see the campaign. Then we can see that it's being played across hundreds, thousands of people across multiple countries, companies, et cetera. And you can tease out fairly quickly in technology terms, but you can tease out fairly quickly here and say, actually, we know that this is a common campaign tactic of threat actor, Hush Puppy, and we'll block the message because we can tell that the lure that's being sent to you is in fact from this particular actor. Or the link that we see embedded inside of the message, we can unpack that link and say, we know where this link is headed. We see these every day. Let's block and rewrite the link so that you can't actually click and get yourself in trouble. And so when you're interacting with your messages, we've already actually thrown them into our sandbox. We've exploded it out. We've checked for malware. We've checked all the links. And in real time, we're running this, and in a matter of a few milliseconds, we confirm that the message is clean and good and send it on to you, or we're going to block it. And so we invest enormous amounts of infrastructure to capture these messages and one by one, blow them through this sandbox and just see what happens to see if it's an okay message to pass on downstream. So in a nutshell, that's really the machinery of ProofPoint day in and day out.
Wow.
That is awesome.
It's interesting because I think, like you said, they're always changing, so you have to always be changing too. They're always trying to find the new. And it feels to me like since the pandemic and everything, it's been an all-time high as
absolutely
connected with hackers.
Yeah, and so Bobby, can I just pick up on that for a moment?
Yes.
Because it's really interesting for you guys and of course your listeners. Per your exact point, what'll happen is the infrastructure, if you think of this as direct marketers, the infrastructure to run all of this is fairly sophisticated. They spend a lot of money on. And what changes is the lure. And so in a COVID-19 world, it is, here's the lure. I'm going to send Bobby an email and say, oh, hey, Bobby, click here to see everybody in your neighborhood who tested positive for COVID-19. That's a really good lure. And Bobby's like, yeah, I want to see that. Click. Oh, Bobby, to see it, we just quickly need your username and password for Gmail, for Office 365, for Facebook, for whatever.
And it makes it look like a real login.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then boom, I've snapped your credentials and I'm off to the races. I'm now you. And now from there, I'm going to try and escalate and learn more. So you're exactly right where these guys are super interesting. They're not dumb. They take advantage of a crisis like anybody else. And so they see a COVID-19. And so all these lures that you see, behind the lure, it's all the same infrastructure. That never changed. They got a direct marketer, right?
Right.
You know, writing a brand new email to lure you into it. And it's what's behind the scene. That's what we see every day. And we can profile it and say, oh, I'm going to check this lure. Boom, click, explode that link out, go check. Oh, this is that same guy all over again. Stop it.
Wow.
Wow.
That is interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
you hear about it, but to actually, hear it from an expert, it's interesting to see how they're able to do that.
Yeah. So with all of this said, and this is the new IT, and we're always curious. So who takes care of this? What IT infrastructure is at your company that, I mean, I'm sure a $1 billion company usually has quite a few developers, quite a few technology folks, but how is that taken care of? What if you're okay with talking about the back end, like how do you guys take care of it?
Yeah, so at first it all starts obviously with fantastic engineering talent. And so inside the company, we're obviously completely tech driven. So most everybody has in their background some form of technical capability. So we've got probably a little over 1,000 engineers if you were to add everybody up that's contributing to product day in and day out. We operate across 7 different global data centers because, as you can imagine, we're taking message flow from around the world and we have to route it through our cloud so that we can see these messages and, as I said, use the sandbox, et cetera, to analyze and predict what we might see coming. And so technologically, we're reliant upon this fantastic set of engineers, our cloud infrastructure, and we also take advantage of services offered through public cloud, for example, at an AWS, through Amazon, et cetera. There are pieces and componentry that will run there because it's more cost effective for us to do that. The other interesting part in doing it is the machinery that runs it all is super interesting, but probably what's most valuable is what I mentioned earlier, what we refer to as a threat graph, but it's the data that we gather, because we're only as good as the data that we have, because essentially we're relying upon holistic data that we think statistically represents all the possible ways that bad guys are targeting you. And if we can represent it in our data, we can catch them. So obviously these guys, they evolve, they change,
They know.
and we now have to catch up to them. And so we deploy a lot of mechanisms to figure out, well, where are they going so that we can keep pace. But it's a game of cat and mouse nonstop with the threat actors that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, do you always feel like you're kind of behind? I mean, I guess I don't want to say behind, but always chasing them, or do you ever feel like you feel like you're caught up or maybe ahead of them in certain
Serious
circumstances?
game of cat and mouse.
Right.
It is a serious game of cat and mouse. And in some areas, you feel like you're getting behind, and in some areas you feel like, you know what, we're starting to shut them off at the pass, right? And
Cool.
we're raising, if you will, the bar of what they have to do to get through to the customer. So it just won't end.
Right. It's never going to end.
The world has bad actors.
Yeah.
The world's going to also have cybersecurity companies like ProofPoint. They're going to go hand in hand.
Right.
And companies should understand that. I think the big thing, and I know me as an IT driven company and person and support person, companies are like, what? Why do I need this outside company to help? Can't we just implement something internally or whatever? And my saying back to that is, okay, well, we could spend $15,000 to maybe shore up some internal stuff and build our own little stuff and things. Or we could use ProofPoint that has spent how many billions of dollars probably on your infrastructure.
Exactly.
Which one makes more sense? I mean, think about it.
Yeah, it's true. And obviously, the scarcest resource in market today is not another set of technologies. It's actually people that know cybersecurity. So if you speak to any of our customers, the tightening of the labor pool overall for technology, as you well know, is challenged, right? We need more and more engineers in the world. But when you narrow that even one step further of people who have domain expertise in cybersecurity, you've
even
got
smaller.
an enormous HR problem on your hands of how do you staff that? And
if you don't mind me asking, I mean, how do you guys deal with that?
Well, one advantage we have is when you're a technology provider, you end up being a destination of choice for great talent, right?
And that's kind of what I assumed, yeah.
Yeah, so that part, I mean, like anyone else in the market, we're always hiring and continue to need to do that. But our customers suffer this even more acutely, where some even sophisticated IT teams, to get the security talent and be able to hold it is a real problem. And so increasingly, what we're saying is, look, we'll bring it more and more as this managed service for you, so we can relieve you completely of even the human burden of operating the systems. And so that ends up being a really great growth market for us as well. And we've invested through some acquisitions of acquiring companies to be able to offer up the managed service capabilities as well. And that's growing tremendously, which really isn't surprising, but growing tremendously of being able to go in and offer that full suite capability.
That's awesome.
That
so
is cool.
yeah, I'm gonna tie back into a little bit. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that there's 1,000 employees. I mean, are they based worldwide? Are they based in Utah, since that's where you're headquartered? Or help me understand like where your staff is.
Yeah, so the company is just a little under 4,000 people total, about 1,000 of whom would be in our engineering groups. And we're actually based in Sunnyvale. So headquarters is in the Bay Area. Here in Utah, though, we've got a little better than 400 individuals that are based here, servicing a variety of functions from engineering to finance and accounting, et cetera.
Got it.
So we have major development centers in Sunnyvale, in Utah, here in Draper. We have a major development center in Toronto, Belfast, Ireland, and in Tel Aviv in Israel. Those would sort of be the largest development centers that we have.
Awesome.
Okay, I gotta. This is my favorite question that I like to ask. So, what do you see the future of your technology? What do you see the future happening with the company, with ProofPoint?
Yeah, I think the future is the economic incentives will remain in place for bad actors, right? So,
right.
Like it or not, I hate to say, because I don't want to sound like we're ambulance chasers, but we have a great market because there's a lot of bad people
Exactly.
that are doing this, right? And their motivations aren't always money, right? There's nation state actors that are doing espionage, et cetera. So that market dynamic will continue. Their sophistication will continue to increase. And so where we need to get better and better on our side, and we are, is it's no secret to your listeners that with the advent of cloud, and in particular public cloud, we're going to see more and more workloads that are moving from what historically have been in on-prem capabilities and moving that into public cloud to take advantage of services there. When you make that change, then there is a different sort of dynamic that takes place for both security as well as your compliance needs as you move into public cloud. So if I've got workloads sitting in AWS, I'm susceptible to their security capabilities, whatever they may be. And so not only do I need to be careful about what policies they may have, but within my tenant, my part of AWS, that's a whole different security profile in the way in which you can treat that from how you might have done it in an on-prem setting. The other part is when you imagine now you've got a cloud application used for HR, so maybe you're using Workday. You've got a cloud application you're using for all of your customer relationship management, so maybe you're using Salesforce. a cloud application for some of the internal workflows, and so you might be using ServiceNow. And the list goes on of all of these major, large tech, successful companies, and you're using Microsoft 365 in the cloud again. So now you've got what used to be all of these on-prem applications, they're all now cloud-based applications. Well, it's a whole market on how do you create an identity that's going to let you easily access those. But it's also a whole market on security as to how do I secure you across every single one of these cloud applications that you now reside in. Because before, you were just sitting inside of, quote, the perimeter of your on-premise facility. You don't do that anymore. The perimeter doesn't exist.
Right.
And that changes everything around the security posture that you've got as a company as well.
So I want to ask this question. In the past, we somewhat joked about it, but I would always say, as long as your security is better than the other guy, you're faster than the other guy that the bear's going to eat, then you're a little safer. But I think now that isn't necessarily, if you have more exposure in your company and you're more outward focused, it isn't any longer just who has a little bit more than the other guy, is it?
No, it doesn't sound that way. I could be wrong, but yeah.
No, so there is a little bit of that. In fact, one of the recommendations that we'll go into with a company is take your exact point, Bobby, but now apply it to the people. Where, let's say I'm in a company of 10,000 employees. Well, a threat actor probably is not actually targeting all 10,000 of you. But you can rest assured, they will target people in your accounts payable because they actually get and wire money out. And so, do I really need to fully secure all 10,000? Yeah, I should be doing baseline practices and I should protect them and help them be okay. But I really better, in my finite security budget, I better identify my very attacked people and I better really put money on them. I might give them extra training. I might actually give them tighter controls over the way in which the messages that come in are going to be handled. I might actually put more infrastructure around them, ensuring they've got multi-factor or other authentication techniques to really protect them. So it's like the bad guys, the guy in the parking lot looking for the unlocked car, in the world of people, he's actually not looking for the unlocked person. He's looking for the person that can wire money.
Yep.
Let's build a moat around that person and use our finite budget and really emphasize the protection of that individual.
Wow. I'm just fascinated with the future. I just think there's so much coming down the pike. Security, but everything, even technology. And with that said, can I ask the last question, Brad? Of course, I'm hogging all the questions because that's what I do.
You're just you're beating me to the questions. That's all it is.
I want to ask from your side and everything you're seeing, and I love it because, you're, like you said, everybody in your company is kind of IT focused or technology focused, and I think we're seeing that more and more more in this whole world. There's no longer IT over there and then the company over here. It's becoming the company. So from your perspective, what do you see for the future of technology, just in general? What are you thinking out there of the craziness of what's going on with IT, and what's your thoughts?
So I think there's my perspective on this, everybody will have a really interesting view. Mine is in part technology, but actually probably more in part humanity. So here's what I mean by that. As good as technology is getting around, artificial intelligence and machine learning and the capabilities and the promise that represents, what we can't forget is the way it built up is through data sets. And I become increasingly concerned that the data that sometimes we're basing these algorithms on have the potential to embed significant bias. And it's one thing when a human holds bias, because there's ways to mitigate the bias, there's ways to help a human overcome bias and so on. But once it gets embedded inside of our systems of AI, ML, et cetera, that's a challenge. So let me give you the example. I believe it's a Netflix documentary, and forgive me, now I cannot recall the name of the documentary. I think it's called Encoded Bias, but it poses some interesting questions of, at the beginning of time, well, not exactly beginning of time, facial recognition, where facial recognition, the training set of the data, this woman demonstrated rather clearly, she was at MIT at the time, that it was working extremely well on white males. Didn't work as well on females, and worked horribly on African American. Well, that's because the data set was primarily being trained against white male. And so what you find is we become reliant upon something like, say, facial recognition technology, and fairly soon that system begins to take over and assumptions get made about the data that it's delivering to us or the predictive response it's giving us. And that can be very, very concerning because you've got an embedded bias now encoded inside of the very system. And so I have concerns about that. That's an impact on humanity. And I think we've got to be really vigilant in the technology industry about where could this possibly be manifest in anything that we're building today. And I think about that in one other context, and that is in privacy. So I think it's probably no secret that if you take someone like Facebook today, one of the challenges that they are facing in the public forum, if you will, is data privacy. And if you take Apple's perspective on privacy and Facebook's, they're completely different.
Yeah, polar opposite.
Yeah, not going to weigh in on the arguments between the two, but they are very different. And so we're going to be facing more and more of these questions of, do we value a human being's right to privacy, or do we value a community or a state? So there's no doubt that, for example, China, as state actors, they don't value the same way we do individual privacy. And so facial recognition in the masses, you can see it in some of the demonstrations in Hong Kong. You'll see them holding up an umbrella. The reason they're holding an umbrella is because of the facial technology that's been deployed, and they don't want to be identified by it. Or even in today's world where you get in the news, you'll get a published picture of people that escaped Afghanistan. You might have seen some of the pictures of that. And sometimes you'll get it where it's a blurred image on the face. And that's because the publisher of the content is concerned about that individual's privacy. And so a non-blurred image could put them at risk of retribution of a state saying, you were at this demonstration, I can prove it through facial recognition, et cetera. And so this is going to be, and already is now, but probably one of the things that's going to face our generation and the next pretty profoundly is this notion of, what does it mean to have your data be private? And what does it mean when we're relying on machine learning? Can I verify there's not encoded bias? I don't have the answers for these things. I'm just saying they're really important topics, and I think they are the future topics, at least in the domain that I spend my time, that we just got to solve as humanity.
We're going to have to be careful because this sounds very Skynet Terminator sounding to me. I mean, it
really does, though. I mean, with privacy and everything, I mean, I can see where there's so much room for interpretation where people can either exploit it to whatever side they're on. So you really got to be careful of where you're at with it.
And I think having more players is better. I mean, that's the other scary thing about if you get too many big giant players, that's I think, at least that's kind of my thought, is that's where Skynet comes from, right?
Yeah.
They take it all over. But anyway, wow, this has been super cool, enlightening. Thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been great.
Yeah.
Brad, any last comments before we head out?
No, I just want to make sure that I update all my passwords because I know it's been a while. But other than that, I think I'm good.
Yeah, every time I go to a security conference or something like that, I'm like, man, I don't want to turn my computer on.
Right.
I went to a Kevin Mitnick one. If you've ever seen Kevin up on stage freaking hacking everybody's stuff and taking their key cards and copying them, I'm like, oh my heck. I do not want to freaking turn my computer on. So thank you for at least, giving us some wise advice and talking about the company and and showing us what's going on. This is what the show's all about. So cool.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for letting me be here, and really happy to do it. Thank you.
Darren, thank you so much. And this is, you've been listening to The New IT.